I love the different ways that animals play.
Yeah. And how we play with them.
Yes. And it shows everybody's different personalities too.
Oh, totally. And yesterday, actually, there were so many people that were just like, yep, dog's there. Now we're going to go do our own thing. I'm like, is this not an experience that you're having together?
I know.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Yeah. Hello and welcome to the Essence of You podcast. I am your host, Steph Lokelani, and I am here with my really, really good friend, Adrienne Evans. Adrienne and I met 3 years ago.
Yeah.
She was my client. She hired me to shoot something called the Rural Summit, which I'm sure we'll talk about here pretty soon. And it was a 3-day shoot. And she found me on Idaho Nonprofit Center's website. I was listed there as someone who can make films and do things like that.
With the best name ever.
Yes. OMG female filmmakers.
Exactly.
Yes. And so that's why she contacted me, was because of the name. And we being me and one of my contractors, Carrie, we went and we shot it, and we've been working together ever since.
Yeah.
And Adrienne is the executive director of United Vision for Idaho, aka UVI.
Yes.
And I'll let you tell us more about UVI and the work that you do.
Sure. So United Vision for Idaho, UVI, has been operating for about 30 years. We are a state-based organization, but what makes us unique is that we are multi-issue. So what does that mean? We've got groups that work on very important issues, but they're often really divorced from a broader context of how all of our issues are interconnected. So we really believe that whether it be healthcare or the environment or social justice, equal rights, these are all part of one construct that we need to address in its whole, so that we can really advocate for and get real systemic change that makes significant improvements in people's lives. And we also do a lot of national work trying to put Idaho on the map. A lot of rural places are really ignored, abandoned. And so it was very important for us to highlight, the experiences of people living in states like ours. And then we also do some international programming. We can talk more about that. But I have been the director for the last 17 years.
That's a lot of work.
Yes. Yes, it is.
Well, and with the way that our country has gone, politically speaking, and just overall in general, has the work gotten harder?
It's an interesting question. I think for many of us, myself in particular, what we're seeing at the national level has not been surprising at all. We have been watching the slow and steady erosion of democracy. I've seen it every day in Idaho.
Mm-hmm.
Our systems have been captured, and it increasingly gives, local, like state people, constituents, the ability to, affect change. Most people don't believe that their lawmakers are listening to them or advocating for them. And that's true, right? By and large, our systems have become corrupt, but it didn't happen overnight.
Mm-hmm.
What makes it more challenging in some ways is that it is now, it is a national crisis. Our democracy is hanging by a thread, and what we're witnessing, democracies around the world are failing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not unique to the United States. But what is unique to the United States is that we've always operated under a constitution. And what's happening right now is that the Constitution is being gutted. Mm-hmm. And, the pillars that hold our democracy together, whether that be our social programs, education, the environment, all of these institutions have been dismantled or, paralyzed by the changes that have been coming in this administration. And now power has become more and more concentrated in the executive, which defies everything that Americans have stood for in terms of liberty, freedom, accountability, and checks and balances. And the other thing that has coincided, right, is the deep, deep division that's occurring in the country, where people no longer see each other as friends, as neighbors, as community members. they see each other as enemy based on their political identities. And that is as much of a problem, I believe, as what we're actually seeing break, because we have to build a cultural and social fabric. Our politics flow from that. But much of what we're seeing is the result of, many of us believing that we're not in it together.
Mm-hmm. I have an example of that. So, because we're friends and we talk all the time.
Yes.
Across the street from me is a house with a big Trump flag. Mm-hmm. And I can see it directly from my kitchen every day. I love standing in my kitchen. I love looking out my huge windows, and then there's that damn flag.
Yeah.
Well, one day, a few years ago, I was walking Frodo in the neighborhood, and then all of a sudden, a lady came down the street, and then we ended up kind of walking on opposite sides of the street, but together in the same direction. And she had a cute little golden lab. And so I started chatting because that's what I do. I was like, oh, how old is your dog? What's your dog's name? Blah, 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 little puppy, brand new dog. So we talked about training and all this stuff, and we keep walking. And then eventually we both turn down my street. Okay, that's cool. We keep going. And then I'm like, well, I'm right here. And she was like, oh, wow, I'm right there. And she pointed at the Trump flag house. Mm-hmm. And immediately my head was like, oh my God, why the fuck am I talking to you? Mm-hmm. And then I was like, no, Stephanie, she's a person. And I think this was actually before you and I started working together.
Okay.
And like, that is how that division happens, is her house, whether it's her or somebody else in her house, is very open about who they support. Yeah. And also because of that, I don't put flags in my yard. I don't have a pride flag. I don't have a Black Lives Matter sign.
Yeah.
Or even everyone is welcome here, because I live alone and I don't need to have that, what would appear to be a target for some people.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's really common that people are not engaging, right? Because they don't want to have those kinds of experiences. Mm-hmm. But, it says a great deal about if you do have that sign in your front yard. I have a neighbor who has lots of signs.
Yes.
And just learned, actually, last week, I was asking, what do these signs mean? And it's an Idaho is too great for hate. Mm-hmm. And I had no idea. She said, why I have this sign is because my neighbors, meaning me and my partner, live next door. And she was so upset about everything that she has been seeing in the state and the fact that LGBT folks, Q folks, have been denied, the same rights as other people, housing, employment, basic things. And then she began crying, and I had no idea. But I think the point being, right, is that we demonstrate our values.
Yeah.
And when we no longer believe that we can do that, we start self-censoring, we start isolating, and that division then only grows deeper and deeper.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. If I said, you know what, I have a dog who can protect me, I'm going to be fine, and I put some of those signs up in my yard, perhaps some of my neighbors will, I talk to most of my neighbors, but maybe more will come over and be like, hey, I saw your sign.
Yeah.
Can we talk?
You know? It was fascinating. We were doing rural organizing in Idaho Falls many years ago. Mm-hmm. So this was the Women's March, the first Women's March, the largest march we'd had at that point.
Yes.
And what was so fascinating is to hear from people in the community say, I didn't know until I saw all of these people show up in the streets that I had lived next to, worked with, been in community with. I didn't know that they shared my values. And it really changed how people began to see each other, and it just opened up space to then form community.
I love that. Okay, I'm going to go get some signs. I know where to get them. We'll be at
Maybe
the
start with,
Center
I love dogs.
That's true. I mean, that'll bring a whole bunch of people
there
over.
You go.
I love dogs, and I make really good banana bread.
Yeah, well, I mean, here's the thing. We have to start with where we do have commonality.
Yes.
Right? And those are humanizing experiences where we can begin to see each other and see each other with dignity and respect. We don't have to agree on everything, But what we have to do is learn how to communicate our different ideas and see where that goes. We might be more surprised that we have a lot more in common with people than we think we do, which has been my experience. If we can cut through the bias and this binary that we're living in, you're either a good person or a bad person. This is either right or it's wrong. Well, truth be told, life is a lot more complicated than that.
Yeah.
So are people.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think the biggest thing that any of us can do to fight authoritarianism or fascism or whatever you want to call it that's taking place in this country is to lean into that complexity. There may be many reasons why your neighbor is flying that sign.
Mm-hmm.
I often hear from folks who voted for Trump, and it's like, look, the system's been breaking for so long. We just wanted somebody who would break it up. Similarly, right, we had the largest Democratic caucus in the history of the country.
Yes, I was there.
Yes, and the streets, you remember, it was just, we had to open up all kinds of venues for Bernie Sanders.
Uh-huh.
And when I'm traveling around the country or the world, people are like, how in the world did a state that did that then turn around and vote for Donald Trump? And I have to remind them that it's probably not as complicated as you think.
Mm-hmm.
Because generation after generation, people just don't believe like they're doing better or that their kids will do better. And they're facing healthcare crises. They're facing a whole lot of things because as our systems have eroded, right, those things are less accessible. And so life gets harder.
Mm-hmm.
So when someone comes along and says, I'm going to break that and I'm going to fix that, it probably sounds pretty good. Now, we have to be very clear that there is a world of difference between what Bernie Sanders was proposing and what Donald Trump was proposing, but also what he's done.
Mm-hmm.
And, I don't know, Steph. I don't really know anybody that I just say, okay, whatever Steph believes, I'm going to go with that.
Yeah.
It's like we're sacrificing our own agency. And we're just not thinking like, if you tell me something, I'm going to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to think, how does that comport with my values? Do I agree with some things that Steph is saying and not others? And then form my own opinion. But we're just being spoon-fed and adopting an identity that, I really believe doesn't really reflect most of us.
I think you're absolutely right. Well, in listening to you say that, it reminds me, it always makes me think of when we met Randy.
Mm-hmm.
So this was when our first gig together, when we did the Rural Summit, on day 3, we went out to Parma.
Notice is where we stopped.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We went out to Notice, which is this really, really tiny town in Idaho. It's lovely. And Adrienne took us to meet a man named Randy. And take it away, Adrienne.
Yeah, well, it started, we were having a visit from a foundation that was interested in maybe funding us. And I'd been talking with them for a long time. And so when she came, I was like, gosh, what am I going to do? And I said, you know what? We're just going to go.
Mm-hmm.
So we jumped in my car and we started driving parts of rural Idaho. And so we approached Randy's store. It's an old gas station from the 1940s.
I love it.
Yeah. And at the time, he and his wife were selling watermelon, corn, from local farmers, and Confederate flags. And I looked at my friend or, my colleague, and I said, that's where we're going to go. And her eyes kind of widened, and it was a real opportunity to demonstrate the work that we do. So we arrive, I introduce myself, and Randy says, well, I guess we're on opposite ends of the political spectrum. And my answer was, well, let's find out. And so we just began talking. And I asked him what rural life looked like, what his fears were. He talked about, in my day, fights used to happen with fists,
Mm-hmm.
and now they're happening with guns and knives.
Mm-hmm.
He was worried about Ammon Bundy
Mm-hmm.
and another Ruby Ridge. He was worried that his grandchildren were leaving and that, what had once been a real community was now being taken over by Big Ag, Farmers who had farmed that land for generations couldn't afford to do it anymore. And real worry about what life looked like for him, but also for the future, right? And so then we went back. And that's when you and your team and 16 organizers, national organizers from across the country, we chartered a bus, went back to go visit Randy. And we began talking about all the realities so that we could really open up our understanding of one another. We can't do anything if we don't do that. And so when I'd asked Randy to show us the Confederate flags that they'd been selling, he hung his head for a minute and he said, I can't, because since your last visit, we don't sell those anymore. And that's the power of building relationship, right?
It absolutely is.
Yeah, I mean, so much of organizing has been conflated with mobilizing. And it really is. Organizing can happen with anyone and for anyone. Anybody listening can be an organizer. Organize your neighborhood.
Yes.
Organize your friends. Organize your block. Have parties, have, gatherings where people can just talk about what they're seeing in the world, what it means to them. And you'd be amazed at how much that changes everything, both socially, but also politically.
Yeah, actually, at my old house, before the house I live in now, one of my neighbors organized a summer block party. And it was beautiful because we all stepped out. It was before COVID. Yes, because I did COVID at my new house.
I did COVID.
I did COVID.
I know. I like it.
Yep. So it was before COVID, but I had just gotten a divorce. So I was living alone, and she invited all the neighbors out, and we all just stepped out of our front doors, and we played one of my short films on one of our neighbors' garages. And this neighbor, at the time, she was like 80 or something. She lived alone, and she would talk about her family, but also how lonely she was.
Yeah.
And so this brought in so much community, and especially on her garage door, we're showing one of my movies, and then everyone else from the block is just standing around having a great time. It was awesome.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing, right? Every single one of us wants to feel seen, heard, and valued. And, we have this, when we get when we compartmentalize ourselves and silo ourselves, it's like this, it's like the pain Olympics. My pain is greater than yours. Instead of, wow, maybe we both experienced some pain going through this thing and it's different. But that connectivity allows us to go deeper and figure out, now that I know you, I don't want you to hurt either. So what can we actually do to improve our conditions? And I know it seems really frustrating politically right now, and it feels like we don't have a lot of power, and it feels like the system is kind of like, off the rails and there's nothing we can do. But just remember that all of the great strides that we've ever made in this country, the Voting Rights Act, our civil liberties, our civil rights, those have never come because anyone wanted to give them to us. They came because we stood shoulder to shoulder with people, millions and millions of people across this country, and we demanded them. And we can do the same thing today, but we have to learn how to stand shoulder to shoulder again.
We do. So what do you think, how do you think that difference came about between, because I think about, Martin Luther King Jr.'s marches and any of those marches, we're not really doing that anymore.
I mean, there are people that are doing a lot. And the No Kings protests have been incredible. I think what's missing is that people just are still, they can show up in the streets, and it's important. It really, really is. It's that demonstration that tells you that, oh my gosh, there are other people like me who believe the things that I do. And I was at the last No Kings and talked to a man who has been a devout Republican his whole life, right? He used to supervise Capitol Police. And he showed me his badge, and he said, but I am now a man without a political home. And so what I like about this march, this effort, is that it brings people together who are searching, because it isn't a party that's going to save us.
No,
it's us, right? And But I think what's missing is the action item.
Yes.
You know, because I think people are still trying to figure out, okay, I did the thing, but now what?
Mm-hmm.
And it can be everything. It can be as small or as big. You know, it can be talking to your neighbors. It can be putting up a banned book library out in front of your house. It can be volunteering at one of the incredible organizations, you know, like Interfaith Sanctuary.
Yes.
You know, what are you doing to make the world a better place? And it can look like a lot of things, but it has to look like something.
Yes.
Just choose. And don't wait for someone to tell you, here's the magic thing, because that's not what movements are. It's a constellation of all of those efforts coming together for the same purpose.
I love that. And you're absolutely right. Because then, you know, you expand a little bit of your sight here. And then after you said that, you start seeing, oh, yeah, I did see this. Portland did that one thing. Yeah. Everybody in Minneapolis showed up and did stuff. And so we are doing it.
Yeah.
Do you think that what we're doing and what we're seeing on social media, possibly in some news organizations, do you think that's making a difference or going to make a difference in our political climate? Do you think we're doing something?
Well, funny you should ask, because I think one of the things that we don't see is ourselves portrayed. You know, so much media is just algorithms, talking points. You know, it's media trying to shape culture instead of media reporting on what is happening. Which is why, you know, we're doing a documentary.
Yep.
You know, Democracy in Motion, featuring people across the country who are doing these kinds of things and involved in deep movement work so that people can really see what's happening and invite them to join.
Yes. And show that, as you mentioned earlier, like put a banned book, little library in front of your house. Even those small movements, that is movement.
Yeah.
And that is helping create change.
Well, and I'll say too, you know, nonprofits in this country are under real attack.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's estimated that maybe half the nonprofits in the country are going to close this year, both because funders are scared to fund because they don't want to be targeted.
Yep.
Right. Or, you know, just for fear themselves. Right. Because there are subpoenas and FBI inquiries and all of these things that it's not that there's anything to hide. It just proves too costly. And, you know, I don't know, probably folks don't know that out of all the philanthropic dollars in the nation, which we're talking billions of dollars, right? Only 6% ever reaches all rural communities, so dispersed among them. And so, you know, nonprofits working in areas like Idaho have always been doing it on a shoestring. And it really is like for pure will and determination that we do this work. So, you know, if you like the work a nonprofit is doing, support them.
Yes.
Whether that's $5 or thousands of dollars, you know, if it matters to you to have advocacy in your state and in your community, you know, nonprofits need help.
Absolutely. Well, and I've had several people who are variously involved in nonprofits. And so one example I like to use is like, think of a theater nonprofit. $5 can help put a costume on a character on stage.
Yeah.
Like even $5.
Yeah. Well, $5 times 100 adds up, right?
Uh-huh.
And, you know, it's just a thing that people can do. But I think sometimes, you know, I hate the giving asks, right? Because it feels very predatory and I'm not good at it and I don't like it. But the truth is, if everybody just gave a little, you know, like that latte, could you give up that latte for a week?
Yeah.
You know, we grow and we manifest what we contribute to. And I often think about democracy like a garden, right? If you don't tend it, then it won't grow. It won't grow, and eventually it will die.
And the weeds will take over.
As you well know,
and
the weeds
will be taller than your head.
Are we talking about your backyard?
We are talking about my backyard.
Okay.
But it's true. It happens, like metaphorically too.
Yeah.
Because you're right. The grass is going to die. The weeds are going to get taller because you let it go.
Yeah. And all the microorganisms, right? And all the things that exist in that ecosystem die with it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not seeing as many bees in my yard because of the weeds.
Yeah.
But they're gone now. So maybe the
well,
bees
now we
will
have
come
a
back.
fresh slate to start cultivating. Maybe that's the message here. It's like fresh slate to start cultivating anew.
I love it. Ooh, okay. And I'll put signs out.
I love dogs.
I love dogs. We'll start there.
My dog loves these values, these positions.
That's a great idea.
No, we don't want Frodo to be targeted.
No, we don't. Frodo, the 14-year-old dog, does not need to be targeted.
He doesn't need any more anxiety than he's got.
He doesn't. He had massive anxiety yesterday because I took him for his walk, which we have to get in the car to go to this place. And I had my seats down because I was hauling gear and I hadn't moved them back up. So I made him stay in the front yard and the gated front yard while I put my seats up. And the look he gave me was just like complete devastation. Mom, what? You can't leave without me. He was so heartbroken. I was like, buddy, you can't stand in the street while I fix these seats.
If only we could just be with our dogs all day long.
I know. Yeah. Oh my goodness. So away from dogs now, because we could talk about.
I know,
this
we could do it all day.
Yeah, you are writing a book.
I am.
Tell me about it.
Yeah. So actually, the way it happened was that on January 6th, this 2026, this anniversary, we did a workshop, a presentation, and we brought in a man named Rich Logis. Now, Rich used to be a really prominent figure in MAGA. And after one of the school shootings, he just had this epiphany. It's too much. This is not what I believe in. And so he wrote a letter of apology to the nation, and it was published in the New York Times. And from that, people who were also questioning and having doubts started reaching out to him and asking, can you help me get out too? And so he formed a group, Leaving MAGA. This is another example of like what one person can do, right?
And Rich is awesome.
He's wonderful. And so he came, and the publisher who had just published his memoir, One Betrayal Too Many, called me up and said, we want you to write a book. And, I've been going through a lot. There's been a lot, like I've been going through cancer treatment and ending it, fortunately, 2 days from now. Yay. Yes.
I'll be there for the party.
Yay. But it's been a journey, right? And all of this work is a lot too. So, in no way did it make sense for me to say, yeah, I'm going to take on writing a book at this point. So being who I am, I said, sure, let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. And then what I really was looking at is a political analysis, coming from a rural place, doing really game-changing programming. We have the United Vision Project. Please check it out. It's a way to actually learn how to have these conversations across difference. And it's a national program. I wanted to offer just that part. And then they said, well, we'd actually like it to be a memoir.
Did they know anything about your past before?
We talked,
okay.
right? And so it's like, no, we really need, and it became clear to me too, that I couldn't really tell that story without telling my own.
Okay.
And how I got to this. But that has been a journey. It's been a lot of deep reflection, revisiting, some old trauma, but also, how does trauma allow you to both understand systems of power and then cultivate your own?
Oh, I love that. I'm excited to read this.
Yeah, it'll be a good read. I can tell you that, because it's a lot of stuff that doesn't actually, that people probably don't talk a lot about. And then certainly an inside look at movement spaces that I, am both blessed to be intimately involved in, and also there are a lot of failures. And so really trying to pull back the curtain on what we need to course correct to build a movement that is not a part of a political party or seen as an apparatus of one, and how movements and leaders themselves need to start like shifting their own thinking about power and how we build.
Yeah, I love that. And the goal is for it to come out this fall.
The goal is to release both the book and our film, so we can invite people, to come watch and, not just watch, but become engaged.
Yes.
And to really see like what is really happening. And then, get a signed copy.
I know. I'll be first in line. Well, I'll probably actually be interviewing people and shooting.
No, you'll be taping the whole thing. Yeah,
exactly. I'll be behind the camera.
I'll set one aside for you.
Thank you. Oh my goodness. Well, so let's talk about the documentary a little bit.
Yeah.
It's called Democracy in Motion.
Yes.
And we have been creating this for 3 years, basically since our first gig together.
Yes.
The Rural
We just
Summit.
never stopped.
We have not stopped. We've been to Georgia together twice.
Yeah.
And then around Idaho. And we are finishing up our interviews this month. We have some incredible people that we get to talk to. We've already talked to and are going to talk to for this documentary. One person being Cherie Buckner-Webb.
Yes.
I am so excited to sit down and chat with her.
Me too. I mean, what a legacy and an inspiration to all of us.
Yeah.
I don't want to give too much away, but I am just really thrilled to have time with her.
I am too.
Yeah.
And what we can say about her, for anyone listening who may not know who the amazing Cherie Buckner-Webb is, she is the only Black,
yes, only,
and she will remind you of that, the only Black female senator that we've ever had here in Idaho.
House rep.
And House rep.
Yep.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's got an incredible story.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's also, people who are behind the scenes at very high levels.
Yeah.
Scott Nakagawa, is a huge movement leader, has been fighting authoritarianism for 40 years. Tarso Ramos, same. And younger people.
Yes.
People who are building movements where they are and coming all together. So it's going to be the kind of insight that, I get to sit in these rooms and I just sometimes feel like, where does it go?
Mm-hmm.
And I really wanted to just give everyone an opportunity, so it becomes more accessible to them too.
Absolutely. And people, because we have such a diverse group of people that we've been talking to and that will be featured in this documentary, that gives the audience the opportunity to say, oh, that person's like me. Mm-hmm. I can do that.
Yeah.
And because there's so many different types of people and people doing different types of work, somebody's going to see themselves in somebody.
Yeah. And it's like, please, everyone vote. We have to vote. But it doesn't stop or start with voting, right? And this is the kind of work that I think we often don't see. Most of the mobilization efforts are get out the vote for this candidate, Democratic talking points. And that's really missing the mark. That's not how we built the civil rights movement. It's not how we brought people together to really say, these are the things that we are for, and these are the people that are for me, and we're going to fight for what we deserve, and we're going to build the world that we want.
Yes. And that's the key there, is building the world that we want.
Yeah.
And there's time. We might not all be here when that happens, but there's time to build that world that we want.
I really believe that we all have a profound duty and responsibility. That we are here, others paid the severe price to allow us to be standing in these moments, whatever your lineage, and certainly for some, that was, really, really painful, and a lot of people died. And for others, it was just continuing the fight. But we are here. And that we are here, it's up to us to make sure that our lives matter and that we leave this world better for others.
Oh, absolutely. I think about all the younger kids that we know, our own nieces and nephews, and I want this place to be a good, healthy place for them.
I want them to inherit all of the best and then have the ability and the agency to make it even better than that.
Yes. Oh my goodness. That would be such a trip to see what those kids are able to accomplish.
Yeah. I mean, I know it's really hard in these moments to feel like the arc of justice, the arc bends towards justice, but it doesn't just.
Mm-hmm.
It takes us pulling at it and moving to make those changes possible. So the worst thing that we could ever do is just give up or, just say it's too hard. I struggle with the fatigue. I mean, believe me, I feel it some days with the work that I do, but that's a privilege.
Yeah.
And it's a privilege that a lot of people in this world don't have. And I don't want us to waste the agency that we do have in this moment, because I think it's really hard for people to envision what it would look like and feel like to live in a place that wasn't a democracy or a representative democracy. And I don't think that most people want to live in that world.
Yeah. So we'll keep building.
We have to.
Yeah, we
do.
We
get to.
get to. Yes.
We're creating, and that's a beautiful, beautiful thing.
Yeah.
If you're angry, if you have frustration, don't get mired in it. Use it. Use it as your fuel to create and give back.
Absolutely. I think of all the artists that I know who are channeling like everything that's going on out there to create some of the best art that they've created in their career.
Exactly.
And like that's how they're channeling it, is through that artwork.
Yeah. We can let it defeat us, but power isn't just taken, it's given. And right now is a time where we all need to take our own power back and recognize that, a lot is wrong, but we are not each other's enemy. There are forces that are trying to divide us, and focus it on that. But focusing on each other is exactly what authoritarians want us to do. All we have to do is look at, the Holocaust.
Yeah.
One by one until there was no one left to stand up for me.
Yeah. Yeah, there are lots of parallels.
Yeah.
And lots of lessons. And we need to remember that.
Yeah.
As we move forward through this change and this work.
Yeah. Change is always happening. But we are not just victims to it.
No, we can take charge.
We can.
We can make that change.
We can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what we're here to do.
Well, let's start dreaming together again, because I just think like if we can't dream it, then we can't build it.
Yeah. And it takes community. Actually, I think we were talking about this the other day. So the term neighboring is becoming a real term. And I believe it came out of Minneapolis because it's people taking care of their neighbors. It's now a verb. I'm neighboring.
Yeah.
And
I love it.
Yeah. And it's showing up for your neighbors. And I don't watch TikTok, so it was probably on Instagram. It was a reel on some social media thing. But it was a woman talking to her phone and telling us that she was walking some kids to school so that they could feel safe. And she was like, and that's what I do every single day right now. I think she's retired or something. And she's like, I wake up and I walk children to school.
I love it.
That is neighboring, and that is doing something.
And it's also getting real curious.
Yes.
Right? I mean, we don't know someone's story.
No.
We don't, you see the Trump flag, but you don't really know. And that they have a dog, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I had no idea. And she was really nice.
Well, and the thing is like we need to expand our curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of assuming that we know, ask.
Yeah.
Tell me more about you. Tell me how you formed your ideas and opinions. Was there a moment? Have there been moments that reinforced these ideas for you? Have you ever had moments that ran counter to those? How did you reconcile them? Most of us are never asked questions that honestly, ask us to reflect.
Yeah.
And to really analyze, I say I believe these things, but tell me how and why. And then let's talk about that. And let's talk about how and why I have differing ideas. And, even if we don't end up on the same page, at least, that is democracy, right? Where we should have different ideas. We should all have different ideas, right? But to be able to come together and figure out, how do we move through those differences to create something that's good for all of us?
Yes. Well, and one example that you use that I've shared to other people as well is like, when did you first form your opinions on race?
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of people who have a lot of opinions about race.
Mm-hmm.
And that is an excellent question because it makes you stop and say, when did I first form those?
Yeah.
And for me personally, I can tell you, it was when I was growing up in Hawaii.
Mm-hmm.
It was taught to me.
Yeah.
I wasn't born that way. I was taught racism.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we moved to the mainland, I got a different version of racism.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, like exploring the whys of why you believe this and why you think this does make you stop. And I imagine that ex-policeman that you mentioned at the last rally, who now he doesn't know who his political party is, or like he's questioning his why. Why was I that person?
Yeah. Well, he's questioning the why,
Mm-hmm.
and it's reinforcing for him his own values.
Yeah.
And so I asked him, right? So is there something that you would want to say to because it was an attempted insurrection that failed, right? And so is there something you'd want to say to the officers that were working that day? And he said, I want to say thank you. And I want to say to every officer and every service person in this country, working in law enforcement, you just keep defending the people of this country and our Constitution. So yeah, he changed his mind, but we also have to give each other grace to do that.
Yes, we do.
It's astounding to me. I know a lot of folks that work in criminal justice, right? And, a refrain often is that you aren't the worst thing that you've ever done.
Mm-hmm.
And yet in so many spaces, what I hear is that is extended to a lot of people and not to somebody who ever voted for Trump. And people are questioning right now. There are a lot of fissures. A lot of people are having doubts. A lot of people feel failed because this is not what was promised them. And we have to be as inclusive as we say we are.
Yes.
And we have to give those folks an opportunity to be in community and work alongside us. Because I'll tell you, if we don't, authoritarians they have been building movements in Idaho, and they're ready to offer that sense of community and belonging to people and bring them right back. So, we can't be naive about that, and that, yeah, okay, maybe it's a little uncomfortable. Lean into your discomfort, because what you're offering is the opportunity to build a movement at scale that we can win for our nieces and nephews, that we can win for our children, that we can leave and heal our wounds and our division.
Well, and you mentioned community, and that's something that's important to a lot of people, and that's what they go in search of. And that's why some people end up in certain communities because they're welcome there. And it makes me think about JR, who we met during the Rural Summit. He's a veteran. Yeah. And he talked about how veterans look for community, and some people prey on veterans. Yep. And that I'm not picking on veterans or anything. It's everybody, but we want that community. And sometimes a community is going to reach out to you and you're just going to get sucked right in. Absolutely.
And JR will also talk about, how progressives have a very complicated relationship with veterans because, it gets wrapped up in the anti-war sentiment, and they are seen as part and parcel of that instead of being seen as probably some of the most democratic citizens that we have who put their lives on the line. But look, people do not understand. So in our work, we have reached out to 13 states. It's been 5 years of doing outreach. We've had 107,000 conversations, reaching out to 1.4 million people to kind of understand what is going on, what is causing authoritarian drift. And, it isn't so much the ideology. It is that this is a place where someone names the problem and they offer me community and a sense of belonging. And it is, I can't fathom breaking from that. even if I don't agree with all of these things, it's worth it to have that.
Yes.
So if we're not, if progressives and people of different mind aren't offering that in its place, then no wonder we're going to keep doing what we're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why we're making this documentary, to show that people can change. We can do this. We can do this, guys.
We can.
Yeah.
And it feels good.
Yes.
Doing this stuff isn't a chore. Mm-mm. It actually fills you up as much as you ever give.
Oh, yes. And I'm going to say, Carrie.
Yeah.
He works for me.
Yeah.
And therefore he works for Adrienne. But we do a lot of work across the spectrum of all different types of things. Every time I say, hey, we have another UVI gig, he's like, I'm in. I am so in. I will, say no to whatever I had planned that day. And he gets super excited, and he loves doing this because it's filling his soul.
Yeah. And he said, right? So when we started working together, I didn't know what to do, but I have a camera.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so therefore he's going out and making a difference with his camera.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We all have something to give.
Yes, we do. Yeah. Yeah. And it doesn't take much thought. You can just be like, oh, yeah, I do have a camera. I can do that. Or I know how to knit. So let's knit some scarves for the homeless people.
All kinds of things.
Yeah.
Yeah. All kinds of things at every level. And it just takes all of us doing something to really, see what change is possible and what it looks like.
Yes. Yes. Oh, I love this. Okay. I have a few questions. What do I want to know about Adrienne? Okay. Tell me about an experience that changed how you show up for others.
Well, I think the most pronounced in my mind right now is I was part of a group of leaders working around the globe fighting authoritarianism. And we went to Poland, and we were in Auschwitz, and we were standing at the juncture where the soldier would determine whether you went to the gas chamber or the work camp. And he began talking to us about Charlottesville. And he looked at us and he said, I know who you all are. And I need you to look and listen and learn, because the world is watching, and it's happening again, and we need you to go home and fix it. And that was a really life-changing moment for me. I had been working, always at UVI, but also at the Wasserman Center for Human Rights, and doing a lot of their educational programming, the Spiral of Injustice, and I just thought this is a bigger moment. And I've got to focus everything that I have on how to fight, authoritarian drift, and so that was pivotal, and I'll never be the same for it. It is my life and it is my work.
I love that. So aside from this work, what do you do for fun?
Now, you know too much about me. This seems like a loaded question. I spend time with friends when I can, probably not enough. I love my dogs. Mm-hmm. Back to the dogs. We were talking earlier about just being in the park with them and snuggling them, and they just give me so much joy. I like gardening. I love being outside. The summer is so beautiful in Boise. And so it feels good to just feel alive.
Yes.
But I guess my fun is also my work. Mm-hmm. I love people. And I've loved this process working with you because it's an opportunity to not just hear and listen and be enriched personally by these stories and these interactions, but to show it. Mm-hmm. And so just, I think people and being in community is what ultimately gives me the most joy.
I love that. I didn't know that. The people part, that's beautiful. Where does your personal story intersect with the work you do in the world? Without giving anything away.
Well, I don't know. I feel like I am the culmination of everything I've ever been through. And that started as a little girl growing up on a college campus. My dad was head of the art department at Winona State University in Minnesota. And it was the height of the ERA. And I saw women breaking boundaries, and, everything in my life was always political. Like, we never sat down to a family dinner where we said, like, hey, how was your day? It was like, let's talk about what's going on. And we would debate politics. Like, that is the world I lived in. When we moved to Idaho, my dad had grown up here and to his family farm. And that was a real jarring experience. Experienced a lot of, racism directed at my mother, a lot of poverty, systems failure, an education system that was just so broken. And so a lot in my life changed. But I always had something to juxtapose it to. And that was a really important part of my story because, I think it's easy if you just are born into those circumstances and you don't know that maybe they're as wrong. Right. Mm-hmm. But then, it was a lot of trauma during those years. You can read about it in the book. But it was about finding myself and finding peace and finding agency and finding my own power and recognizing those wrongs and my ability to help right them. And that really, I think, was the through line of my entire life. And then I found this work, and it's where I really have been able to fulfill it, at least to the best of my ability.
I love that. And I want to go back a little bit. You mentioned that when you were a kid, you would talk about politics, like at the dinner table. And I thought about this earlier, and then the thought left, and I'm glad we brought it back. That is not how I grew up in any way. And so, yeah, I'm pretty sure my parents encouraged us to vote, but it was always vote Republican. Mm-hmm. One memory I do have is I was still living in Hawaii. So this was before I turned 9 years old. And me and my cousin Justin, he's my best friend cousin because we're the same age. We were sitting at the table, and me and him were talking about politics. And then our papa, my dad's dad, walked into the kitchen. He was like, what are you kids talking about? And we're like, we're talking about voting. And we started shouting, Dukakis, Dukakis. And then my papa, while also joking, but I knew which direction he was leaning, he was like, Bush, Bush, Bush. And you could just kind of see the joy in my papa's face that we were having a close to political conversation while we're both shouting and chanting who we wanted to vote for. I don't know who Dukakis is, although I know that my papa wasn't voting for him. And so, of course, I'm going to vote for somebody anyway. Like, that was the extent of it. And then in Washington, when Desert Storm happened, my dad would clip all the newspaper articles about it and save it. Mm-hmm. And to this day, I don't know why. I should ask him because he's also writing a book. Okay. Yeah. And if he doesn't include it in the book, I'm going to tell him he should. But that's my experience. And so in starting to work with you, I was like, holy shit, this is a life. Yeah. This is the work that we need to be doing. And nobody told me that.
Yeah. It's funny. When you say I didn't know who Dukakis was. So as a kid, like, I'm 11, right? And I'm working for the Mondale campaign. I'm working for the Dukakis campaign. And it was everything in between. So, like, we would discuss politics, but we would discuss all of the tenets of a policy.
Oh, wow.
And we didn't agree all the time in my family, right? And we would have fierce debates, right? But what we did learn how to do is look at the issues from different vantage points, but stay firmly connected to, what is my position. And I will say that, and also anybody who's listening who knows me knows that I don't know if I don't want to apologize, but I've literally subjected everyone I know to all of it, right? So in my 20s, it was like, we're going to have watch parties for the debates.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah.
Why are we not doing this now, Adrienne?
Well, I think part of it is that I too have become pretty disillusioned with the two-party system. And not to say that they aren't gulfs apart. But what has happened, in my view, to the Republican Party is that it has been overtaken by a group that wants to dismantle democracy. And what I've seen happen with the Democratic Party is that it's really transitioned into the role that the Republican Party once played. And there's so much corruption throughout. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't actors who are exceptional, but they're operating within a system that's very corrosive. And so I think for me, it's like, we can't make these people, there's no candidate, there's no party, there's not even like, these figures that we hold up like the Martin Luther King, right? It's us. I mean, I don't like the hero villain narrative at all. I think it's really problematic and leads to a lot of division. But if we have to work within that, everyone listening, like, you are the hero in your own story. You are the hero in this moment. People everywhere are the hero in this particular story. And I think, throughout time.
Yeah. I love talking to you.
There's a reason we hang out, right?
Yes, there is. Oh my goodness. We can go for hours. And then eventually I'm like, oh no, I need to go feed my dog.
Or can I have another drink, please?
This is heavy shit, Adrienne. I need another drink.
No, I mean, look, it can seem real distant from us, but, when people say that I don't do politics, look.
I used to be that person.
Yeah.
So keep going.
Well, here's the thing.
Yeah.
Politics does you. Politics is entrenched in everything. Look at how, we are operating in the world, or the media that we select right now, or the people that we talk to or don't talk to. All of that is being influenced by our politics. And it goes much, much, much deeper than that. So you can think that all day long, but reality is we are not divorced from the society that we live in, and politics are a big part of that.
You are so right. Because, that's what I used to say, because I don't pay attention to them. I don't know anything about them. I wasn't raised that way. But you're right. I do politics. And I remember the first time I voted, I was well into adulthood because no one talked to me about this. And I was ingrained in what I was doing at the time. And the first time I went to vote, when I walked out of there, I didn't know if I made any changes, but I fucking voted, and it felt so damn good.
Yeah.
And it was the primaries for something. Yeah.
Well, look, these folks are making decisions about the way your money is spent, right? Whether we, go to war in our name, right? The tactics that we use, whether that be on U.S. citizens in ICE raids. They are making decisions about our healthcare, our education, every facet of our lives that matter. And so the question is there anybody that you would just like give your power to and say, that's okay, just make those choices for me, right? We all have to hold those folks accountable. And when we don't, what we're saying is, I trust this person to make all these decisions on my behalf without my input.
Ooh, that makes me think of doctor's appointments. Where you're like, wait a second, sir, I did not say that.
Yeah.
That is not what I'm going through right now. Stop putting words in my mouth.
Yeah. Or just think about like regular things that you just wouldn't let somebody else make the decision for you about.
Yeah, like what plants I'm going to replace all those weeds with.
Yeah. Do I want to change the muffler in my car?
Yeah.
I'll let somebody else decide.
Oh,
no. I mean, not to make it like, ridiculous, but we do, we want agency.
Mm-hmm.
We want to feel like we have a say in the lives that we live. And voting's a great way to do it, but in an important way, and we must, but there are also a lot of other ways.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm. Okay. Final question.
Oh no.
When everything external falls away, like our titles and our labels, who are you, Adrienne, at your core?
Ooh. That's a really, I should have read these before.
Oh, I didn't present this to you.
Okay. Who am I?
That one's the surprise.
Okay. Who am I? I think, I don't know. I'm like a kid. I'm curious. I have a really big heart. You're gonna make me start crying. This was the point. That's why they're here.
Yep.
Who am I? I try to just be somebody who's compassionate and understanding. I love laughter and joy and the different ways that shows up in my life. And I love the richness of the complexity of how we experience the world. And, we're amazing people. And it's like, I think I was telling you the other day, the Walt Whitman poem, Oh Me, Oh My, that I may just contribute a verse.
Yeah, I like that. Well, we've covered a lot today. Like we always do every time
there should
we
be
talk.
a disclaimer.
I think there's going to have to be a disclaimer on this one. If you're okay with politics.
Yeah. And make sure that she's going to make you cry at the end.
Yeah, exactly.
No, Steph, I mean, you're amazing. Your gift to see people and to really put that on display, both through podcast and film and photography. It's a real gift to work with you. And I'm just so excited because, this journey is just beginning.
It is just beginning. Yeah, we've got, we can say it here, even though the state hasn't approved it yet. It's coming because it takes time. We are starting a production company together called Motion Storyworks.
Yes, we are.
And it involves our documentary, and we have lots of plans for future work in the politics area.
Well, and it's for people. It's for people to see themselves in the stories that they are often not included in. It's so important because we shape all these ideas around images that are given to us.
Yeah.
And most often they're given to us to keep us divided and keep us looking at each other as other.
Absolutely. Well, I have a very politically diverse family, and I have to let that go. I have to be open to what they have to tell me and why they choose the things that they choose.
Yeah.
Last night I called my sister and I was like, what are you doing? Because I heard stuff in the background. Oh, I'm watching the fights. I was like, really? Okay.
Yeah.
There's a soccer match on too.
Yeah. Well, and let's be clear. Understanding isn't the same as agreeing.
Yes.
Right? But there is a real difference when we vilify others based on their beliefs and we fail to see them as human beings.
Yeah.
When we engage in that kind of behavior, we are doing the work of authoritarians for them.
Absolutely. And okay, before we go, I want you to talk a little bit more about United Vision Project.
Yeah.
Because that is how we can have these conversations.
Yeah.
And the way that my phone call with my sister ended, we talked about what I needed to talk to her about. And then I said, well, enjoy the rest of your evening watching the fights. And she was like, thank you.
Yeah. It's not easy.
No.
Yeah. Well, and to that point, right? So the election of 2024, I was just really reeling with how we got here again. But also, 2020, everybody just thought, okay, it's over. We're moving on. And so in 2020, I was just really wrestling with division like that doesn't go away. And we need to figure out what's going on. And people need help learning how to have conversations across extreme difference. And so we basically kind of born out of COVID too. We had access to a text-based program. So this time we retailored it. So we really wanted to change the technology to fit the authenticity of our program. So we reach out to people who are very much like, your sister watching the cage match, and people who are deeply, entrenched in that thinking across the country. And we ask them, our country may be more divided than it's ever been. What do you think is causing this? And then we listen, but there's an extensive training program that helps people who are, very differently minded, right? Progressive. Most would describe themselves as liberals who want to make a difference in healing that division. They are taught how to, deeply listen. Most people never have any formal training in deep listening, to lead with curiosity and empathy. And we have like a 62-page searchable narrative guide that helps people learn how to ask questions differently, to deepen the conversation and pivot to different areas. And I'll tell you, we've learned a lot about what's actually beneath the surface. It's the largest set of data that exists anywhere in the world at this point. And it has helped thousands and thousands of people learn how to de-escalate, to regulate, to not participate in division, and to actually take those skills into their own community to start bridging them and building political power on the ground. And it's just an incredibly beautiful thing to see. And it's something that everyone can do. I plug it, I guess. It's unitedvisionproject.org. And you just sign up, and then we have trainers that will work with you, and then you'll be a part of a community that's doing that together.
Yes. And it's such a great community.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being on my podcast.
It is a delight and a pleasure. And thanks everybody for listening, because, you're doing such great work, and it's a treat to be here, but it's also a treat to listen.
Yes. Thank you. And thank you all. And we will be back again with another episode. And Adrienne, maybe Motion Storyworks should start a podcast.
Maybe we should do that.
Okay.
Thanks, Steph.
Bye.